It must be frustrating to be a Canadian Conservative. You get all your news from American-owned media or toxically partisan politicians rage-farming donations off you on a whole score of things you're repeatedly told are scandals and corruption, but which your political saviors continually fail to find and prove enough evidence for. It's almost as if they were a slightly less crazy version of their U.S. Republican cousins, claiming fraud and insisting there's mountains of evidence of cheating and dozens of whistleblowers and witnesses, but repeatedly failing to pony up any actual evidence or facts when it comes time to prove their charges are real. And since incel trolls seem to insist on determining who is Canada's greatest crime minister, I'm here to help neocons, and I'll do so with a list created by your own claims and comments to my earlier posts. So let's start with Trudeau. First off, there's that Aga Khan vacation, a minor ethics violation that was flagged by the ethics commissioner, monies were repaid, and no charges laid. The word for that is nothing burger. But let's compare that to the time Harper approved the vote-buying bribe to dying MP Chuck Cadman. Hey Chuck, they said, help us topple the government over a fake scandal we're inventing, and we'll give you $1 million life insurance policy so your widow is set up for life. Neither of those resulted in charges, but a lot of people who berate Trudeau for his longtime family ties with the Aga Khan Foundation gave Harper a pass for political graft, and let's face it, being one heck of a cold-hearted bastard. Then there's the dressing up in racist costumes on official trips abroad. Sorry, that's supposed to be about Trudeau. Ugh, Jimmy? Okay, diving deeper. A favorite bone of contention for Conservatives is SNC-Lavalin. This is the one where Trudeau and his party were accused of pressuring the Minister of Justice, who was also the Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, to replace a criminal trial that could destroy the Montreal-based engineering firm of SNC-Lavalin with a deferred prosecution agreement. Now, whether you believe SNC executives belong in jail or not, the fact is a DPA is a valid and long-standing legal penalty for a corporation which employs tens of thousands of Canadians to keep both the company in business and those Canadians from losing their jobs. And as Mulroney's Conservative Minister of Justice and Attorney General Kim Campbell rightly pointed out, the person in Jody's position is wearing two hats and must balance their duties as member of the PM's cabinet and government with their duty as Canada's top cop. The inconvenient truth is, Jody was never ordered to go the DPA route. She resigned and was not fired, and her replacement did exactly the same thing she was going to do. So after millions of dollars wasted on 3 investigations by the opposition, the verdict on that is nothing burger. Trudeau was investigated, and the committee's result was that he did try to put influence on his minister, but that it wasn't illegal or improper for the PM to do that with his minister. In fact, it's been argued by many of the nation's top legal experts that not only did Trudeau do what the PM was supposed to in that instance, but the real scandal would have been if Trudeau had done nothing to save SNC. Oddly, through all that, no one pointed out that SNC's charges, which the Liberals were at odds over, stemmed from corruption done during Harper's time in government. Because again, using their habit of non-tendered single-source cronyism to decide where to spend tax dollars, Harper agreed to sell the reactor division of the country's billion-dollar crown corporation Atomic Energy of Canada Limited to SNC-Lavalin Inc. without competition, a deal which cost Canadian taxpayers more than $60 million. SNC was later caught slipping more than $100,000 in illegal donations to both the Liberal and Conservative parties between 2004 and 2011, amounts well above the legal limit and given during the years that Harper was in government. And to show his disapproval, Harper rewarded Norman Morin, the SNC vice president who engineered the illegal donations, with an appointment to the Port of Montreal board in 2006. But we're not talking about the Conservative SNC scandal, because none of that came to light until 2013, when a damning list of bribery and corruption charges against SNC-Lavalin and its operations in India, Bangladesh, Libya, and at home in Quebec were made public, all of which occurred during Harper's time, which led to the aforementioned criminal trial of SNC-Lavalin. So the flaming bag of poo left on Trudeau's doorstep was put there by Stephen Harper. Selective memory is interesting, huh? Moving on to the We Charity and the Emergencies Act abuses. Both investigations set up while the Liberals were in minority, even on the panels, both of which resulted in multiple committees costing Canadians some $30 million each, and both of which resulted in no charges or proof of wrongdoing despite RCMP investigations, Ethics Commissioner investigations, and the Liberals being a minority on the committees doing the investigations. Look, just because you don't like the result, Conservatives, if you can't prove wrongdoing on a committee with a Liberal minority, that's because you're flawed flogging another nothing burger. I won't get into the ridiculous claims that Trudeau controls international supply chains or worldwide inflation, because that's just too stupid a concept to give air to. I will point out that Canada is doing better than average in the G7, G20, and OECD rankings at mitigating the effects of supply chains and inflation. We even managed to keep our gas prices lower per liter than America for most of it, proving the carbon tax had almost zero impact on gas prices, despite Danielle Smith and P.P. Poilievre's repeated drum beating. Oh, and that drum beating is the reason Trudeau has no interest in giving free air to his critics on the election meddling by foreign powers, both Russians benefiting the Conservatives and China for the Liberals. The issue is the meddling, and that's where our nation's focus is and belongs. But I can't end this without getting into the actual abuses and crimes committed by the head of Canada's government, which Conservatives are awfully silent about. The ones that really prove who Canada's most corrupt Prime Minister is. See, while Prime Minister, Harper obstructed the Parliamentary Budget Officer over everything from G20 overspending on the billion-dollar gazebo to his $18 billion single-source F-35 contract and his $16 billion BC boat sourcing scandals. He even prorogued Parliament just to end the PBO investigations into those. Surely not the act of an innocent person, right? Something Trudeau's never had to resort to, at least. And then there's the Afghan detainee scandal. You know, the one where Harper got the very first contempt of Parliament in Canada charge from the most respected parliamentary speaker in the entire Western world, Peter Milliken, and then he prorogued Parliament again and called a snap election to avoid answering any questions in it in the House of Commons. After which, he said, well, the people of Canada have made their choice. They know about it. They voted. They cleared us. Which again is odd, since Harper insisted the election itself cleared him in the eyes of the voters, despite no one even knowing about the BC boat scandal until after the votes were cast. But Conservatives keep bringing up things the Liberals did many elections ago, or even before that person was in politics, despite Canadians repeatedly being given the exact same opportunity over and over to decide if those are issues, and then re-electing the Liberals time and time again, because clearly they're not. Oh, and speaking of elections, the Conservative Party was fined by Elections Canada for more than $300,000 on the In-N-Out scandal. And who can forget the voter suppression charges relating to the robocall scandal, where independent contractors were hired to suppress Liberal voters in competitive ridings, or that Harper's parliamentary secretary Dean Del Mastro actually went to jail for election fraud, or that Conservative Patrick Brazeau was charged with fraud and breach of trust, or that Conservative Arthur Porter was charged with fraud, abuse of trust, and money laundering, or Bruce Carson was charged with influence peddling by the RCMP, and Nigel Wright resigned in order to end an RCMP investigation. All Conservatives, and all while all of them were sitting MPs. Actual charges filed. And need I mention again that current Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is still under an active compliance agreement with Elections Canada for election fraud that he committed during the 2015 election. Still. Oh, and Harper's Conservatives, of course, used taxpayers' dollars to cover the party's legal bills in many of their election fraud cases, because why would anyone in government actually pay for their own defense? Am I right? Now, I'm the first to admit that Harper's mistake with the Senate was more a bad decision and not a scandal. But there was a Senate scandal caused by Harper's appointee of neophyte politico Mike Duffy, and made worse by Harper's chief of staff. And while no charges were laid, there were serious fines, official censures, and rule changes that remain because of Harper's action. So maybe there was a scandal. After all, more resulted from it than has happened because of anything Trudeau is alleged to have done. And how is it not a scandal that Harper's government muzzled Canadian scientists, kneecapped funding in award-winning international recognized areas of climate research, and then deliberately ignored those scientists when they won a Nobel Prize for Canada? We don't win Nobel Prizes very often. A real leader would be celebrating our success, not ducking them over petty politics. But right, under Trudeau, Canada is broken. And then there's my favorite, where the self-proclaimed steady hand on the economic wheel of Canada not only failed to ever balance the budget, but wasted $25 million per year on Canada Economic Action Plan spending in marginal ridings, trying to look like his government was investing in infrastructure, even though nearly every dollar was either later clawed back or passed on to the provinces. And finally, for those who think Trudeau's Emergency Act was an overreach, there's Harper Bill C-51, which the then Privacy Commissioner of Canada stated was the Harper government giving near limitless powers to 17 federal agencies for privacy invasion, and which Harper used to weaponize the Canadian Revenue Agency against charities and environmental groups he didn't like. I've already dealt with Trudeau's blackface and the claims there's been no progress on clean drinking water for the Indigenous in earlier videos. Both nothing burgers. A nothing burger and a nearly complete file. So let's wrap up the remainder of the troll's clearly one-sided lists. There's PPE to China. Yeah, during a global pandemic, Canada sent PPE to many nations that indicated they had a shortage. Many of those nations, including China, returned the favor. I don't even get that one. The 11 million spent on cottage renovations. The cottage is under the authority of the National Capital Commission, and like Rideau Hall, Parliament, 24 Sussex, or the recently renovated residence of the leader of the opposition Stornoway, renovations are not up to the PM or government, but an independent panel. 300 million spent on mobile health units that weren't used. Okay, the Fed can control healthcare supply, but the provinces have to hire doctors and nurses to staff them. Had any province needed or wanted these MHUs, they were ready to go. And you know what? They still are. Should any area of the country suffer a natural disaster that needs additional beds, etc. So again, I don't get this one. Chinese election interference. Anyone surprised that hostile foreign governments are trying to influence elections isn't paying attention. This tweet is from 2020. The fact is, CSIS and Elections Canada are investigating, and Canadian elections are among the most secure in the world. And Elections Canada has said that there's no evidence any of the campaigning had an effect on the actual election, and therefore would not have changed the result. And you know who else said that China's interference didn't affect the result of the 2019 election? Then Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole. That's who. Sure, we're a target. Every democracy is. And if there's any proof, it'll be found, and those involved will be charged, just as they were under Canada's most corrupt Prime Minister, Stephen Harper. Yeah, never bring a troll to a bear fight.